Adeola Kazim was a name the whole of Lagos couldn't stop whispering about. The billionaire whose wealth built skyscrapers, whose parties turned night into gold, whose donations filled hospitals and universities. Adeola wasn't just rich, he was the symbol of unstoppable success. Yet one morning, his gleaming penthouse was empty. His convoy was missing. His office stood cold. He had disappeared without a trace. Speculation exploded. Some said he had been kidnapped by rivals. Others whispered he had gone mad from the pressure. The boldest theories claimed he had faked his death to escape enemies or guilt. No one knew that, just a few miles from his empire, Adeola was sitting quietly at a local outdoor cafe in a worn leather jacket and dusty jeans, sipping tea like any ordinary man. He watched the city breathe around him, the noisy yellow Kiki Napeps racing by, the vendors shouting deals in the morning heat, the music blasting from nearby stalls. For the first time in years, he wasn't Adeola the billionaire. He was just Deo, a man looking for something real. The decision hadn't been sudden. It had built up slowly, like rain swelling a riverbank. Contracts, meetings, stage smiles, fake friends, hollow awards. Adeola had felt the walls of his golden cage closing in. The final spark had been the betrayal of his most trusted advisor. A man he treated like a brother had siphoned millions from the foundation Adeola set up for orphan children. That night, staring at the city skyline from his glass castle, he realized he had everything except peace. Without telling anyone, he packed a small bag, took a simple car, and drove out into the anonymous streets. Now, with a fake ID tucked in his back pocket and a few thousand naira in cash, Adeola was ready to rediscover the heartbeat of life. No security. No staff. No cameras. Just him, Lagos, and whatever fate threw his way. At the cafe, a man about his age sat down at his table uninvited. He wore a cracked wristwatch and shoes that had seen better days. He introduced himself as Musa. Adeola stiffened for a second, unaccustomed to such casual intrusions, but relaxed when he realized Musa just wanted conversation. "Hard times, my brother," Musa said with a chuckle, seeing Adeola's worn clothes. "You could say that," Adeola replied, smiling carefully. Musa laughed again. "Join the club. I'm just happy I made it another day. Lagos will not kill me." His laughter was infectious, and Adeola found himself chuckling too, a genuine sound he hadn't heard from himself in months. Musa shared his dreams, saving up for a mechanic shop, moving his mother to a better home. Adeola listened closely. This was a man who had nothing, yet spoke as if he owned the stars. The conversation stirred something inside Adeola, admiration, envy even. As the sun beat down harder, a group of kids ran by, playing with a worn-out football. One little girl tripped and scraped her knee near Adeola's table. Instinctively, he knelt to help her, cleaning the wound with a tissue from his pocket. The girl looked up at him with tearful gratitude. "You're kind," Musa said, watching. "Not many strangers would bother." Kind. That word hit Adeola like a hammer. In the corridors of his empire, kindness had been treated like a weakness. Deals, strategies, manipulation, those were the rules. Yet here, on the dusty sidewalk, kindness was currency. The day slipped into evening. Adeola wandered through the streets, exploring parts of the city he had never allowed himself to touch. He found a cheap room above a bar, thin mattress, no air conditioning, peeling walls. Yet he slept better than he had in his mansion for years. Over the next few days, he met people, vendors, artists, hustlers, dreamers. They had no idea who he was. To them, he was just Deo, a quiet man with a good heart and quick hands willing to help paint a wall, fix a broken chair, or cook jollof rice at a community kitchen. One evening, while helping organize a charity food drive in a bustling market, he met Zora. She was vibrant, all fire and laughter, with deep brown skin, dreadlocks wrapped in a bright orange scarf, and eyes sharp enough to cut through steel. She was arguing passionately with a local official over unfair food distribution. Adeola watched, amused and impressed. "Help me carry these, stranger," Zora ordered, thrusting 2 heavy sacks of rice at him without waiting for a response. He obeyed with a grin. It was the beginning of something he couldn't yet name. Over the next weeks, Zora and Deo became friends. She was suspicious of him at first. He was too well-mannered, too alert, too educated. But his consistency melted her doubts. They spent hours together, organizing events, laughing at silly jokes, sharing street food under the neon lights. For the first time, Adeola was seeing life without a golden filter. People cared about family, honor, survival, not fame or fortune. He realized he loved this chaotic, beautiful world he had abandoned for polished boardrooms. But peace never lasts forever. One rainy night, while huddled with Zora and Musa under a bus stop shelter, a luxury SUV screeched to a halt across the street. Men in dark suits jumped out, scanning the crowd. Adeola's heart raced. He recognized the faces, bodyguards from his company. They were searching for him. Zora noticed his sudden tension. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing," Adeola lied, pulling his hood tighter over his head. But he knew, his time as Deo the nobody was running out. He had tasted real freedom. Now, the glittering chains of his old life were reaching out to drag him back. And the question burned in his mind. Could he choose a different future, or was the billionaire life a trap he could never escape? The rain hit the streets like 1,000 tiny hammers, bouncing off rooftops and flooding the gutters in minutes. Zora pulled her scarf tighter, laughing as she tried to shield herself from the worst of it. Musa swore loudly, cursing the heavens for ruining his worn-out sneakers. But Adeola wasn't laughing. His eyes stayed locked on the black SUV across the street. The bodyguards fanned out, each one scanning the crowd with grim precision. They were trained to find him. To bring him back, willingly or not. "Come on," Zora yelled over the rain, grabbing his hand. "Let's move before we get soaked." Her touch jolted him into motion. Together, they sprinted through the crowd, splashing through puddles, weaving between street vendors who had thrown tarps over their goods. Adeola kept his head down, feeling every muscle in his body tense. At any moment, he expected a rough hand to grab his shoulder, to hear his real name bark through the downpour. They ducked into a narrow alley lit by a flickering neon sign. Breathless, Zora leaned against the wall, laughing again, oblivious to the invisible wolves at their heels. "You're acting strange, Deo," she said, peering at him with a curious smile. "Are you hiding from an angry girlfriend or what?" Something in her teasing tone eased him, just a little. He shook his head and tried to smile back. "Something like that." She nudged him playfully. "You city boys are always in some kind of drama." Adeola let the moment stretch, the danger fading into the background like a distant drumbeat. For now, he was still free. He would deal with the search party later. Right now, Zora's laughter was the only sound that mattered. They found shelter in a small, bustling bar called Mama Kudi's Place. The air was thick with the smell of grilled meat and pepper soup. Old highlife music played from dusty speakers. The patrons barely noticed the soaked strangers squeezing into a booth at the back. Zora ordered them hot bowls of yam porridge. As they ate, she told him about her dreams, to start a youth center for kids who had nowhere else to go. She spoke with such fierce passion that Adeola felt a sharp pang of guilt. Here he was, a man who could have funded 100 centers like hers with a single signature, and yet he sat pretending to be poor, pretending he couldn't help. "You okay?" she asked, noticing the shadow cross his face. He forced a smile. "I'm just tired. It's been a long few weeks." She reached across the table and touched his hand. Her skin was warm. Her eyes held no judgment, only a strange, soft understanding. "You don't have to explain," she said. "Whatever you're running from, it doesn't define you." The words hit deeper than she knew. For the first time, Adeola wondered, maybe he wasn't just hiding from his wealth, his betrayal, his loneliness. Maybe he was running from himself. The version of himself that had let so much rot grow unnoticed inside his empire. Later that night, as the rain eased and the city exhaled steam from the wet streets, Adeola lay awake on his thin mattress. He stared at the cracked ceiling, listening to the distant hum of generators and the occasional shout from the bar downstairs. He thought of Zara, of Musa, of the other souls he had met these past few weeks. Each one carrying burdens heavier than gold. Yet they smiled. They laughed. They lived. And here he was, with more resources than most could imagine, paralyzed by fear and shame. He made a decision in the darkness. Tomorrow, he would start helping, not as a billionaire hiding in plain sight, but as a man. A friend. A neighbor. Quietly. Without flashing lights. Without buying loyalty. Maybe, just maybe, he could build something real for once. The next morning, he woke before dawn. He pulled on his worn jacket and headed out into the waking city. At the community center, Zara was already there, hauling crates of donated books from the back of a rickety truck. Without a word, Adeola jumped in to help. She flashed him a grateful smile, and they worked side by side until the sun rose, turning the wet city into a gleaming canvas of gold and green. The children arrived first, barefoot, giggling, curious. Zara read them stories under a sagging awning while Adeola repaired broken shelves with borrowed tools. Musa showed up later with a battered guitar slung over his shoulder, ready to teach a few songs to the kids. As Adeola watched the scene unfold, the laughter, the music, the simple joy, he felt a peace he hadn't known since he was a boy. But peace, he was learning, was fragile. That afternoon, a journalist appeared. She was young, sharp-eyed, and far too observant. She claimed she was doing a story on grassroots community efforts. Zara welcomed her warmly, eager for any publicity that might help the center grow. But Adeola's instinct screamed. The journalist asked too many questions. Focused too much on him. "What's your name again?" she asked sweetly, notebook poised. "Deo," he said with an easy smile. "And where are you from?" "Around," he replied vaguely, hoping to deflect. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. She smelled a bigger story than a struggling community center. She smelled mystery. And mystery, he knew, was like blood in the water to sharks. That night, he barely slept. He knew it was only a matter of time before someone, somewhere, connected the dots. The security team. The media. His enemies. Adeola had slipped into the river of ordinary life, but the tide was turning. His two worlds were about to collide. And when they did, the people he had come to care about might be the ones who paid the price. Was there still a way to protect them, without losing himself all over again? The next morning dawned crisp and bright, washing the city in clear sunlight. The puddles from the previous day's storm sparkled like tiny mirrors across the cracked sidewalks. Adeola sat on the community center's front steps, sipping a weak cup of instant coffee, staring out at the slow stirrings of life around him. Zara arrived in a cloud of energy as always, balancing a basket of fruit in one hand and a stack of old textbooks in the other. Musa followed, strumming a soft tune on his battered guitar. Children trailed behind them, laughing and shouting, their backpacks bouncing wildly with each step. Adeola tried to shake the lingering sense of dread from the night before. Maybe he was being paranoid. Maybe the journalist was harmless after all. But deep inside, a warning pulse steadily, trouble was coming. Still, he smiled as Zora plopped down beside him and handed him a mango. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Today's the big day, Deo," she said, elbowing him. "We finally get to open the after-school program. I hope you're ready to be mobbed by tiny humans." He laughed, peeling the fruit. "As long as they don't bite." By mid-morning, the courtyard was alive with activity. Zora had set up reading corners, Musa led music games, and Adeola helped organize art supplies donated by a local church. The journalist reappeared, snapping photos from the sidelines. Her presence itched at the back of Adeola's mind, but he forced himself to stay calm. He wasn't running anymore. At least, he told himself that. In the late afternoon, as the kids worked on colorful murals along the back wall, Adeola caught Zora watching him. Her smile was soft, thoughtful, different somehow. "You know," she said, wiping paint off her hands, "you're not like most guys I meet around here." He shrugged, heart thudding. "Maybe that's a good thing." She tilted her head. "It's not just that you work hard. It's like you're carrying something heavy, but you don't let it crush you." The words hit him harder than they should have. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. Before he could find the words, the sound of heavy engines cut through the courtyard. A black SUV and two dark sedans rolled to a stop outside the gate. The air changed instantly. Mothers scooped up their children. Vendors pulled their carts closer. Musa tensed, lowering his guitar mid-song. The car doors opened. Out stepped men in crisp suits, their eyes hidden behind dark glasses. In the center of the group was a woman Adeola recognized immediately, even after all this time, Madame Rennie, his father's chief advisor. She scanned the crowd like a general surveying a battlefield, her sharp gaze landing squarely on him. There was no escape. Zora noticed the shift. "Friends of yours?" she asked wearily. Adeola stood slowly. His legs felt like iron beams. "You could say that," he murmured. Madame Rennie approached, her heels clicking like gunshots against the pavement. "Mr. Adeola Bamidele," she said coolly. "Your father demands your immediate return." The world around him blurred, the children, the music, the sun-soaked courtyard, all faded into a cold, distant hum. Adeola stayed rooted to the spot. He glanced at Zora, who looked between him and the woman with growing confusion. "You have the wrong person," Zora said, stepping in front of him instinctively. Madame Rennie's lips curled in amusement. "I assure you, we do not." She nodded, and two men moved forward. Adeola raised his hands. "No need for drama," he said quietly. "I'll come." Zora grabbed his arm. "Deo, what's going on? Who are these people?" He looked down at her. Her brown eyes searched his face for answers. He owed her the truth. But not like this. Not in front of everyone. Not when the whole fragile world they had built here was about to come crashing down. He leaned close, voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Zora. I'm not who you think I am." Before she could respond, the men flanked him, guiding him firmly toward the SUV. The children's laughter faded behind him. Musa shouted something, but Adeola couldn't make it out. His heart pounded in his ears. As the car door slammed shut, sealing him inside, he caught one last glimpse of Zora standing in the courtyard, arms crossed tightly around herself, as if trying to hold together the pieces of a world she didn't yet realize was shattering. The ride was silent. Madame Rennie sat across from him, studying him like a hawk studies a wounded bird. "You've made quite a mess," she said finally. "Running away. living like a commoner. Associating with these people. Adeola stared out the window. The city rolled past, vibrant, chaotic, alive. He loved it more fiercely now than he ever had the cold, sterile halls of his family's mansion. "They're not just these people," he said quietly. "They're better than any boardroom full of liars." Madame Rennie sighed dramatically. "Your father is not pleased. The board is restless. Your absence has made you look weak. Vulnerable." He turned to face her, anger burning behind his calm exterior. "Maybe vulnerability isn't a weakness," he said. "Maybe it's strength." She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "You sound like a poet. Not a businessman." The car pulled into the towering gates of the Bamidele estate, a fortress of marble, steel, and arrogance. Adeola felt the old life pressing in around him, suffocating, heavy. He wasn't the same man who had left these gates weeks ago. He wasn't sure he could ever fit back inside the gilded cage. But he would have to face it. At least once. As he stepped out of the SUV, the staff lined the steps, bowing stiffly. Cameras flashed from hidden corners. Somewhere inside, his father waited. Waiting to crush whatever rebellion still flickered in his heart. As Adeola climbed the marble steps, he made himself a promise. He would play their game. For now. But he would not forget Zara. Or the children. Or the life that had shown him what real wealth looked like. And he would find a way back to it. No matter what it cost him. Because some things were worth more than all the riches in the world. Even if it meant risking everything. The grand hall hadn't changed. Massive chandeliers dripped crystals from the high ceilings, casting glints of cold light onto the polished floors. The walls were lined with heavy paintings of ancestors, all portraits glowering down in judgment. Every footstep echoed in the vast emptiness, a reminder of how small even the rich could feel in a house built to impress rather than comfort. Adeola was led down the familiar corridor, past the formal sitting rooms and the vast library he had once loved as a boy. They stopped before the study doors, towering slabs of dark mahogany carved with the Bamidele crest. A butler opened them with a bow. Inside, Chief Bamidele sat behind a desk so large it might have doubled as a ship. He looked exactly as Adeola remembered, imposing, broad-shouldered, his hair more salt than pepper now but his posture as rigid as ever. His bespoke suit was immaculate, a sharp contrast to the weary, rumpled boy standing before him. The chief didn't rise. He simply tapped his pen against the desk and said, "Sit." Adeola obeyed, the weight of the room pressing on him. The door shut behind him with a soft but final thud. "You embarrass this family," Chief Bamidele said without preamble. His voice was a whip crack of authority. Adeola met his gaze, unflinching. "I found something worth more than your companies." A muscle twitched in the chief's jaw. "You found children in rags and a woman with dirt under her fingernails." "I found real people," Adeola shot back. "I found meaning." The chief leaned forward. "Meaning doesn't pay for the hospitals you want to build. Meaning doesn't fund scholarships. Money does. Influence does." Adeola clenched his fist on his knees. "At what cost?" There was a long silence. Then Chief Bamidele chuckled humorlessly. "Still the idealist. Just like your mother." The mention of her sent a crack through Adeola's armor. His mother had been the only softness in this house. She had fought for every scrap of humanity inside these marble walls, and she had lost. Chief Bamidele stood and moved to the bar, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. "You have two options," he said, swirling the amber liquid. "Stay here, reclaim your name, take your place on the board. Or, vanish. Be written off as a shameful footnote. And if I stay, you will marry the woman I've chosen. You will lead the company alongside the old guard. You will forget whatever foolishness filled your head out there. Adeola's chest tightened. You can't control my life. His father sipped the whiskey. I already do. A knock interrupted them. Madame Rennie stepped inside, whispering urgently into the chief's ear. His expression darkened. Without another word, he stormed past Adeola and out of the room. Adeola stood frozen for a moment before following. Down the main staircase, into the marble foyer where the butler scrambled to move out of the way, the house buzzed with tension. At the massive front doors stood a crowd. Zara. Musa. The journalist. And behind them, half the neighborhood, it seemed, gathered on the manicured lawn like a living wave. Adeola's heart slammed against his ribs. Zara stepped forward, chin high, eyes blazing. You took him from us, she said, her voice carrying in the vast space. We want him back. Chief Bamadiel's face twisted in disbelief. This is private property. You are trespassing. Zara didn't blink. We don't care. The crowd behind her murmured in agreement, stronger now, surer. For the first time in his life, Adeola saw fear flicker across his father's face, not fear of physical harm, but fear of losing control. The chief turned to Adeola, furious. You brought this shame on us. Adeola breathed deep. And finally, he knew what he had to do. He moved to Zara's side, taking her hand in his. I'm not yours to control anymore, he said to his father. You have your world. I have mine. There was a stunned silence. Then, slowly, the people began to cheer. Not loudly, not violently, but a deep, rising sound of hope. Chief Bamadiel's lips pressed into a thin line. Without another word, he turned and walked back into the house, the doors closing heavily behind him. Adeola turned to Zara. I'm sorry I lied, he said softly. She squeezed his hand. Just don't lie again. They laughed, giddy, terrified, free. The crowd parted as they walked together down the long driveway, past the fountains, past the gates, back into the world that had chosen them. And this time, Adeola chose it back. But even as they disappeared into the golden afternoon, Adeola knew their fight wasn't over. Money had long arms. Influence had sharp teeth. And his father wasn't a man who accepted defeat quietly. No, this was only the beginning. But for now, he had what mattered most: freedom, love, and a purpose bigger than any fortune. And in the heart of a city alive with dreams, that was more than enough. The days after their return were a blur of color, music, and fierce determination. Zara, Adeola, Musa, and the others didn't just sit on their victory, they built something. They rented a small, dusty office in a forgotten corner of the city. Peeling paint, cracked floors, and windows that barely stayed open. But to them, it was a palace. It was theirs. They started organizing, setting up free legal aid for the displaced families Chief Bamadiel's companies had hurt, offering microloans to small street vendors, teaching job skills to young men and women who had once thought life had passed them by. Adeola emptied his personal bank account, the one he had stubbornly kept separate from his father's empire. It wasn't much compared to billions, but it was enough to spark something real. He sold his last sports car without blinking. He sold his watches. He sold the penthouse he hadn't visited in years. With every sale, he felt lighter. Meanwhile, Zara worked at his side, tireless and brilliant. She knew these streets better than anyone, knew who needed help, knew how to stretch every coin. Her strength was a fire that kept everyone moving, even when exhaustion threatened to swallow them. At night, when the streets finally quieted, they would sit together on the office's rickety rooftop, sharing bowls of jollof rice from a nearby vendor. The city lights sprawled out below them like a sea of promises. One night, As a soft breeze rustled Zora's braids and the stars blinked like shy witnesses, Adeola turned to her. "I never thanked you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For saving me." Zora laughed, low and rich. "You saved yourself, city boy. I just helped you remember who you are." He smiled, reaching for her hand. And in that moment, without fanfare or drama, Adeola knew he had found everything he had been searching for, everything his billions could never buy. Love. Belonging. Purpose. But trouble brewed beyond their small world. Chief Bamidele wasn't a man who forgot humiliation easily. From behind the mirrored windows of his towering office, he watched his son's movement like a vulture circling above. Every charity event, every social post, every whispered rumor reached him. And every time, he felt his legacy cracking a little more. His advisors urged him to let it go, to focus on his vast empire. But pride is a dangerous thing. One evening, as golden light drenched the glass walls of the city, Chief Bamidele made a call. To an old friend in politics. To a banker who owed him favors. To a journalist whose loyalty had been purchased long ago. Whispers started circulating. That Adeola was a fraud. That his charity was a scam. That he was exploiting the very people he claimed to help. Zora and Adeola fought back fiercely, but scandal is a hungry beast. Crowds that once cheered began to murmur. Donations dried up. Doors slammed shut. And just when it seemed the weight might crush them, help came from the most unexpected place. The people. The same vendors Adeola had helped secure permits for. The same mothers Zara had taught to run small businesses. The same street kids Musa had pulled into their community projects. They flooded social media with videos, testimonials, raw footage of real change. No fancy PR team. Just truth, bright and sharp and undeniable. The tide turned again. This time, not because of money or power, but because of faith. Because Adeola had finally built something that didn't belong to his family name. It belonged to the people. Months passed. Their organization, New Dawn, grew bigger than anyone had dreamed. It spread to neighboring cities, then across the country. Young billionaires who once sneered at Adeola's rebellion now begged to donate, to be part of something meaningful. He welcomed them, but on his terms. No strings. No photo ops. Only action. Chief Bamidele watched it all from afar, increasingly isolated in his fortress of gold. One evening, alone in his massive study, he poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared at an old photo tucked inside his desk drawer, a picture of his wife holding a laughing boy in her arms. He traced the boy's face with a trembling finger. Pride and sorrow warred inside him. But he didn't call. He couldn't. Some walls are built too high to climb down from. On a bright, blistering afternoon almost a year later, New Dawn hosted its biggest event yet, a free concert celebrating local artists, vendors, and dreamers. The open-air stadium pulsed with energy. Adeola stood backstage, heart hammering, as Zora took the stage to introduce him. Her smile was the same one he had fallen in love with, the smile that dared the world to be better. When Adeola stepped out, the roar of the crowd hit him like a tidal wave. Not for his wealth. Not for his name. For what he chose to build. For who he chose to be. He raised the mic. He looked out over the sea of faces. And he said, simply, "We are the future." The cheers shook the sky. And somewhere, far away, behind high gates and heavy curtains, a proud old man raised a glass in silent salute. Life had moved on. The legacy had changed. And it was better this way.